But Yaakov, if you want to react to that and maybe also give us your kind of guess of where Zionism as a political movement is going.
Well, I think Zionism has been moving from the ostentatious left, because it used to be very socialist, kibbutz and all that, to fascist right. And this has nothing to do with the personalities involved. I think this is a very natural evolution of a political movement, which is based on discrimination, on ethnic nationalism. And here it's important to distinguish between ethnic nationalism and civic nationalism, because in the system of ethnic nationalism, just like in anti-Semitism, you cannot change your characteristics. In other words, either you belong or you don't belong. You cannot change it. And I would say that violence that we've observed in the Middle East, in West Asia for the last 80 years is largely connected with Zionism. Not entirely, but largely, because you have to control the population that is naturally unhappy. You displace it, you exile it, you discriminate, you now submit it to genocide. Of course, they're not going to be happy. Of course, there will be resistance. But this resistance is not considered by Israel as legitimate and as logical in a way. But they try to dress it as anti-Semitism. I would say that if China had invaded Palestine, you would have exactly the same reaction. Or the Swiss decided to invade Palestine, you would have anti-Swiss sentiment. So I think that all of this has to be spelled out. And, well, if I may, my other little book that Jeff referred to about Jewish rejection of Zionism. You see, this is really important to understand that what is happening among Jews is also logical. I would say, well, I don't have sociological data, but the higher the income of the Jew, the more Zionist he's likely to be. Right. And that's why you have Adelsons and others. And it may have nothing to do with their Jewishness, but there is another very important group that is part of the lobby, the arms manufacturers. Israel is very important both as a consumer and as a producer of arms. And there's very close connections between the American and Canadian, incidentally, arms producers and Israel. So, and these are very important parts of society because it's one of the wealthiest sectors of economy. So the evolution of Zionism in the direction of fascism is perfectly predictable. And I would say that it certainly is not Bibi Netanyahu or Smotrich or Ben Gvir who are also very much mentioned in among those who say, well, how horrible these people are taking Israel in the wrong direction. I wouldn't say so. I say that they embody that trend towards fascism, which had been there from the beginning.
And then maybe we have to be mindful of time. Jeff, if you want to take 2 minutes to give your kind of concluding thoughts, and then the final 2 minutes go to Yaakov.
Excellent. Very briefly, this point that Yaakov made about the reaction of the Palestinians and the reaction of co-religionists in the Arab world was that resistance formed, and basically since 1996, when Netanyahu first became prime minister, he brought along with his American advisors the clean break doctrine. The clean break doctrine says that Greater Israel will control all of Palestine. There will never be a Palestinian state. But more importantly, even that in response to resistance movements like Hamas or Hezbollah or others, Israel's response will be to overthrow the governments in the Middle East that support those resistance movements. That's Netanyahu's insight. Don't fight the resistance, fight the governments that back them. So Israel has been on a war spree since 1996. And Wesley Clark famously told us about the 7 wars that the U.S. would fight. These are basically U.S.-Israel wars. And that list included Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. And here we are. We've had several Iranian small wars. This is supposed to be the big one. So this is the logical effect also. You abuse your colonial settler, you push aside the local population, there's resistance, that resistance has its allies regionally, and you end up in regional war. And this is the disaster that we're in.
Very sad. Yaakov, please.
Well, I think it's important to distinguish between Zionism as a political movement and Jews and Judaism, which may be a religion or ethnic group, whichever way you want to put it, because this confusion really serves Israel and Zionism. Israeli leaders, whether they were socialists like Shimon Peres or Bibi Netanyahu or anyone else who would come later, will convince you that Israel represents the entire Jewish people. And for Israel, it's a source of legitimacy. For Jews, it's a source of shame and insecurity. So it's very important to see that Israel not only hasn't brought security to the Jews, that's what the Zionist movement was promising. In fact, the most insecure place for a Jew to live today, I think, is Israel. But it also brings insecurity to Jews in Michigan or in California or in Montreal or wherever they live. Strangely enough, not in Tehran, because Jews there don't identify with Israel.
Yeah.
And the anti-Zionist government of Iran knows very well how to distinguish between Jews and Zionism. So, and, you know, I've been to Iran. I even wrote about Jews in Iran. It's available on the internet. And I hope that they are not harmed by what Israel is doing to that country.
And I think this is like a fundamental insight from all of your work, Yaakov. Judaism is a wonderful and peace-loving and wise religion, and Zionism is a highly problematic political movement of various kinds, including Christians and Jews, but going over and beyond that. So please, everybody, we ought to love the Jews and work on the Zionist issue. And never hate anyone in any case. Please, it only hurts.
播报新闻是我的日常，必须时刻保持妆容和皮肤的最佳状态。当来到人生中最重要的时刻，也是 KS 逆时奇迹帮助我轻松驾驭，闪闪发光。KS 逆时奇迹活肤露全效精华、精华霜，多达5种 EGF 6大冻龄关键成分，保湿效果让我非常满意。小细纹也不再困扰我，我就是我自己的最佳女主角。KS 让我从容自信，光彩动人。我是我人生中的大女主，我的最爱我做主。KS 逆时奇迹系列热卖中，下单请上快点购，透过中天新闻网 App 下单立减50，或输入 CTI 推荐码有额外折扣。